Ladies and gentlemen, I've been speaking to you in my previous two speeches about 3D printing, and now I'd like to continue on the same topic. I'd firstly like to speak in this speech about the advantages of 3D printing. I'd like to tell you a few of the benefits that we might see if 3D printing becomes a more developed practice or developed technique. After that, I'm going to tell you a bit about the disruption that 3D printing might bring about in certain industries. So, what are the benefits of 3D printing? The potential benefits for the future? Well, we could start by imagining ourselves as a manufacturer, somebody who has a factory and who produces goods. Now, what happens nowadays is that goods are produced often they might be produced in China, very far away, where the labour is cheap and where goods, all the resources necessary for production are all concentrated in one place. And then this good is then shipped over to another country and where it is sold. With 3D printing, what could happen, on the other hand, is that it is no longer necessary to have large factories in countries out to the east, for example, and now what we may be able to do would be to be able to produce goods where the market needs them. So, for example, if I produce electric sockets, then I can print off the number of sockets that I need in order to satisfy the demand in my local market in London without having to be able to call China and tell them how many orders I'll need for the next month or so. Then also for manufacturers and for industry, there is another advantage in terms of prototypes and in terms of design. If you produce a product, you have to design it first, of course, and this design often is not necessarily exactly the right specifications, or it doesn't quite fit your needs. And so you have to go back to the drawing board, you have to design the product once again and do another test with your new redesigned product. So this is called making a prototype and testing the prototype. So at the moment there's a very lengthy process when creating prototypes because one has to go through a very long manufacturing set of procedures in order to make a product. But if 3D printing becomes the common way of production in the future, then what we will see is that a manufacturer will simply need to sit down at the computer, make a few changes to the design, print it out very rapidly, and then test that prototype. If it doesn't work, then simply go back to the computer, make another design, change it ever so slightly, print that out again, and do another test. So it's a much faster process. Then what about the consumer? Will we as consumers benefit from 3D printing? Well, first of all, if you can imagine what it would be like having a 3D printer in your home, then I'm sure you can think of a whole host of advantages it could bring. But also, if you need to buy specific products which are custom made for you, then you may find it much easier as well buying things that are suited to your needs. So, for example, if you're a keen golf player, you might nowadays go along to a sports shop, try out a number of different types of golf club, and then you would choose the golf club which best suits your needs. But in the future, with 3D printing, if we're able to make golf clubs, then what we will be able to do is that you will be able to go along and have measurements taken at the sports shop, and then they will be able to order a custom-made golf club which is specifically exactly what you need. And another advantage of being able to quickly produce custom-made goods is not just for the consumer but for society at large. If a custom-made good can be produced very quickly and easily, that means that companies will no longer need to have a number of different sizes or number of products made with specific specifications and anymore. What we will see is that instead of having to make golf clubs of a number of different sizes, companies will just be able to produce the right golf club for the right person when it's necessary. And that will mean that they will no longer have to have so much waste. They won't have to be producing golf clubs that won't be needed. Now the same goes for a whole host of other products. I could mention, for example, hearing aids, which have to be very specifically fitted to each person's ear. If they can be printed out in a tailor-made fashion, then that would be much quicker and easier. Now another advantage for 3D printing is that we, as I alluded to earlier, we will be able to make our own products at home. We will no longer need to go out and search for the right product. We'll just be able to look for the design on the internet and print it out. So for example, I could take one very British object, a domestic appliance that you might find in every British home, and that's the kettle, which we use to make a good old cup of tea. So what does a kettle do? It boils water. So it is made up of a number of different parts. So if you want a kettle, you can print off firstly the body, which could be made out of plastic or metal, and the 3D printer would print it layer upon layer. Then once you have the body, you can make the heating element which goes inside. After that you can make the cables, the wiring which fits into the body, and if the design is made in a user-friendly way, then you'll be able to snap all the pieces into each other and simply assemble the kettle with your own hands in a short period of time. This will, of course, make it easier for the consumer, but what about the disruption that all of these new easy approaches will bring about? Well, with the example of the kettle, I would no longer need to go and buy my domestic appliances in a shop. I would simply be able to print them out at home. So that could wreak havoc to our high street stores. It would mean that many shops would just simply have to close down, and we would maybe end up with not much on our high streets and not much life in our towns consequently. That's just a possibility. I don't know if that's really likely. But how else could 3D printing cause disruption to different sectors? Well, if we consider that nowadays we use postal services a great deal, then we should consider the consequences that 3D printing could have on that. Now at the moment I know myself that I order a lot of products from eBay which are then delivered to my door via Royal Mail, and if I were able to print the product at home, then I would no longer need this postal service, and that could cause the postal service possibly to close down. So what else could we say about postal services and delivery? Well, if we consider deliveries, then we should not just think about postal services, but we should think on a broader scale as well. Now, I'm thinking in particular about companies like UPS or FedEx that deliver products around the world. How would they be affected? Well, it seems that their niche in the market at the moment is delivering things, delivering specific products very quickly, wherever it may be around the world, and they may lose out in this market because of 3D printing, and they're set to lose a great deal potentially. So for example, if you own a factory in France, then nowadays if one of your machines breaks down because of one part which is no longer working, then if you don't have that part in stock as a replacement, then you would have to order it from a factory very far away. And this is where FedEx and UPS come to the fore. They can deliver a product, a spare part which specifically fits your requirements very quickly. It might be expensive, but they can do it. In the future, however, with the advent of 3D printing, the factory owner may realise he doesn't have the part in stock. He can't replace his machinery, but he can simply print it out from his 3D printer, as long as he has the right design, which he can probably get from the internet. So in this case, there would be we would see that the delivery company would lose a lot of money. But UPS in particular is trying to preempt this loss in profit. They are nowadays experimenting with a new idea. UPS are including 3D printing services in many of their stores. This means that as a member of the public, you can go into you will be able to go into a UPS store in the future with the design of your product that you want on a USB stick, and you will simply be able to plug it into their printer, pay them a fee, and they will print out your object for you. This will be in much the same way as a photocopy shop works nowadays, or a print shop. You just go in and get your document or your whatever you need printed out. Now, there's one final area of disruption I'd like to mention, and that is the area of intellectual property and patents. So nowadays, when a company makes an object or a product, they can have a patent on it, and it can be very difficult to copy that product because the manufacturing process is very long. But what is now happening with 3D printing is that you can indeed take an object. I can take maybe a special pen which might be patented, or maybe a mug which is a particular shape or a particular design, and I can copy that, I can scan it with a 3D scanner, and I can actually have an exact replica made with my 3D printer. So this means that abuses of intellectual property design or intellectual property rights could become rife. Once there was a... this is actually similar to what we're seeing in other markets, in other areas. As a result of the digital era, it is now possible to exchange music very easily over the internet. And so over the last few years, I'm sure you can all think back to how the music industry has seen huge amounts of disruption in terms of the model it uses in selling its wares, in selling music. And we could see a similar thing happening to manufacturing. If it's easy, if exchanging music disrupted the music industry, then just imagine what it would be like to easily manufacture a product and share the design with many people. So, ladies and gentlemen, I've told you about the advantages of 3D printing, and I've also spoken a bit about industrial disruption. In my next speech, I'll continue talking about 3D printing. There's a lot to say on this topic, as you can see. I'm very interested in it. But this time I'm going to speak about the disadvantages of 3D printing to society. And there are quite a few interesting points I'll bring up. Thank you.